So in today's lesson, we're going over the stance. We have a couple things that we want to talk about: foot flare, how wide, how close. There's a couple rule of thumbs that I usually indicate to people. First one being, closer the stance, the less far you can hit it. So if I were chipping, if I were pitching, where I'm basically restricting how far I want the ball to go, I want to have my feet close together. That allows me to hit shots that are very short, very delicate, mainly around the green or as we're getting closer to the green. If I'm hitting a driver, again, I'm trying to build on the distance, so I'm going to have a wider stance. Not to say we can't widen out the stance for irons or widening out the stance for maybe bunker shots or flop shots, but those are going to be bigger motions that we want to hit. So if I'm in a bunker, I'm not necessarily chipping it. I'm learning how to build the stance so I'm in there solid so I can make a fuller swing. When we're pushing the stance together, we're just trying to make less of a swing, and that helps us keep us on balance. The other fundamental rule that we have is open stance is restrictive of our hip turn. So a lot of people who are faders of the golf ball or need to encourage hip rotation, it's helpful to actually close the stance. So closing would mean if I was aiming parallel left of my target, okay, that'd be a square stance. If I drop my right foot back, that's helping me turn and create more of a hip turn and a shoulder turn. Whenever I have my stance line open, it's much more difficult for me to actually turn my hips. Not to say it's a huge restriction, it's just a little bit of a restriction. That's why it's not uncommon to see tour players, better golfers, hit shorter pitch shots from an open stance. It's not really like they're aiming left. They're opening up the stance because on those shorter, touchier pitch shots, we don't want as much rotation. So here's a little open stance, turn, and then I'm hitting it. That helps me reduce my distance. So as we get into the wedge conversations, how to hit a shot that feels comfortable, that where we're reducing that distance, we might actually start opening, okay? If we're trying to create a little bit more of a hip turn, maybe we're trying to hit a driver a little bit harder, maybe we're trying to influence our path a little bit more, we might actually close the stance down and allow ourselves to have a little bit deeper of a hip turn. So the baseline of what we're going to go over in the video is how to find what's comfortable for you. There's a lot of different stance lines out there every week on the PGA Tour, but here are the things that I think are the most helpful. One is when we have wedge shots, you know, I take my reference of the upper body. So as you can see here, I'm standing here, I've got my armpits. So you can see my armpit, I'm letting a club hang down. It's basically the outside of my feet are inside of my armpits. So that would be more of a wedge stance. As I move into an iron stance, you can see my armpits are now on the inside parts of my feet. Okay, as I go to a driver, I'm actually keeping this here and I'm just dropping the right one back. So you can see, again, armpit, left foot, inside. Right foot, now I have more of a gap. That's going to influence the direction. That helps us move the ball forward while keeping everything square. Now, most people in golf swing from what is considered a closed toe to straight toe stance. So that kind of looks like this. So you can see my toes are fairly square. So if I were swinging this way, you'd see my toes in here like this. As we open up the feet, we add a little what we call a foot flare. That's just taking our toes, working them outwards. All that does for us is allow us to engage the hips a little bit more. So as you can see, if I have a closed toe, I'm setting up here pretty neutral, turning, and I'm hitting. I'm reducing my hip turn. It's not a bad thing. Some people overturn the hips, so we might even close the right foot or close the left foot down. But if I wanted to engage more hip turn, I'm going to allow my feet to open up just a little bit. Okay, now I'm setting up. I can increase the distance a little bit. I'm increasing that turn. So again, from this angle, we can see my feet are flared out. A lot of people will call it duck feet, something similar to that. All this is helping me do, rotate a little bit more. There's some other things that it can influence, but for the main part of this video, it's really just incorporating more hip turn. So as we're learning our setup, what's comfortable, you can actually help yourself out by maybe flaring out the left a little bit more, bringing the right toe in a little bit more square, maybe because we want more hip turn on the way through and not as much on the way back. So one of those examples would be, let's say I turn my hips a little too much on the way back, but I need to fire them a little bit more on the way through. So I'm going to bring this toe in just a little bit, still flare the left. That's going to help me keep that hip turn a little bit more solid on the way back, but allow me to really rotate on the way through. Number one thing we're trying to incorporate with all of the videos is trying to help you understand your own swing and help you figure out what works best for you.